Have you ever realized too late that people you love stop seeing you the way you see them? That the moments you waited your whole life for can quietly turn into the ones that break your heart? At 67 years old, after 4 decades working as a seamstress out of my house in Southside Atlanta, I never thought I'd hear my daughter-in-law Tasha celebrate my absence from my son Ethan's wedding as if my presence were a curse she had finally dodged. That Saturday morning, I woke up before sunrise, just as I had done every day since my husband Curtis passed away 15 years ago. I carefully pressed my best navy blue dress, the one I had bought specifically for this occasion after saving up for 3 months. This was the wedding of Ethan, my only child, the boy I raised alone after Curtis died in a work accident when we were barely 35. I fixed my hair with care, put on my mother's pearl earrings, and checked the gift I had prepared for the fifth time. It was a complete set of hand-embroidered sheets that had taken me 2 months to finish, working every night after completing my daily sewing orders. The trouble started when I left my house headed for the First Metropolitan Baptist Church downtown. The main water pipe on Clover Lane had burst overnight, completely flooding the main avenue. Firefighters had blocked off 3 city blocks, forcing all traffic onto back streets I had never navigated before. My neighbor Dalia yelled from her window, "Grace, you can't get out this way. It's all shut down since 5 in the morning." I had to walk 15 blocks in my high heels until I found a taxi willing to take the long route around the city periphery. By the time I arrived at First Metropolitan, the ceremony was already over. I looked for the main entrance to the reception hall, which was marked by arches, but I got confused in the parking lot and ended up walking toward the back of the venue, where there was a small garden with benches for the bridesmaids to rest between photos. That's where I heard the unmistakable voice of Tasha, my daughter-in-law, talking to her friends, Kendra and Candace. "Thank goodness she missed the whole ceremony," Tasha said. "You know how she is, always with her sad stories, always talking about how hard it was raising Ethan alone, always reminding everyone she doesn't have money. It's better that she only showed up now." Kendra laughed. "Oh, mothers-in-law are like that, always playing the victim. My mom says it's typical of those older ladies who have nothing else to do but stick their noses in their kids' lives." Candace finished the thought. "Plus, can you imagine if she had shown up in that old outfit? You can tell she doesn't know how to dress for elegant occasions. It's better this way, right? No poor mother-in-law drama." The 3 of them laughed while I stood frozen behind a bougainvillea tree, feeling their words pierce my chest like a jolt of cold electricity. Old outfit. This dress had cost me the equivalent of a week's pay. Sad stories. I only told them about my life when they asked, trying to be honest about my circumstances without sounding whiny. Poor mother-in-law drama. For 2 years, I had financially helped Ethan and Tasha with the down payment for their condo, slowly giving them my savings every month until they had the $8,000 they needed. I took a deep breath, smoothed my dress, checked my makeup in my purse mirror, and walked into the ballroom through the main door with a calm smile. "Grace, thank heavens you made it," Ethan shouted when he saw me, running to hug me. "Mom, I thought something terrible had happened to you." I hugged him tight, inhaling the scent of his new cologne, feeling the expensive fabric of his suit against my cheek. "A pipe burst on my street, son, but I wasn't going to miss your wedding for anything in the world." Tasha approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mother Payal, what a shame you missed the ceremony." "It was so beautiful." I kissed her on the cheek and said softly, "The important thing is that you're married now. God bless you both." Throughout the entire reception, I began to notice familiar behaviors that I had previously ignored or rationalized. My sister-in-law Simone, Ethan's sister, introduced me to some people as Ethan's mom. But when other guests asked about my work or my life, she quickly changed the subject or pulled her conversation partners away. My nephew Devin, Simone's son, barely greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek before disappearing among the younger guests. My nieces, Chloe and Skylar, who used to always seek me out to chat at family gatherings, this time only exchanged courtesy greetings before finding excuses to leave. When it was time to open the gifts, I watched every reaction carefully. The expensive presents from Tasha's bridesmaids and relatives were met with genuine exclamations of joy and prolonged gratitude. When Ethan opened my package with the embroidered sheets, Tasha quickly lifted them, muttered an automatic, "Thanks, Mother Purall," and immediately placed them beneath the table with the other minor gifts. The sheets on which I had invested 60 nights of labor, embroidering intertwined initials and tiny flowers, were treated as an inconvenient formality to be swiftly dealt with. It was at that moment, watching my gift of love be discarded with indifference, that the words I had heard in the garden gained a deeper meaning. It wasn't just the cruel comment of a nervous daughter-in-law on her wedding day. It was a reflection of how they truly saw me. Someone inconvenient, outdated, out of place in their prosperous modern lives. A relic from Ethan's past that they preferred to keep on the sidelines of his new married life. During dinner, I sat at a table with people I didn't know well, distant relatives of Tasha's, who were polite but aloof. From my seat, I could see the main table where Ethan and Tasha sat surrounded by their closest friends. All young professionals dressed in expensive clothes, talking about topics I didn't fully grasp. Investments, international trips, exclusive restaurants. It was as if an invisible wall separated us, a social barrier I didn't know when it had been built. The dancing started with modern music I didn't recognize. The younger guests took over the floor while the older ones remained chatting at the tables. I waited all night for Ethan to come and ask me to dance, as he always did at family parties, but he was completely absorbed in his new wife and her friends. At 11 o'clock that night, when the party was in full swing, I decided to go and say goodbye. Son, I'm heading out now. I have to work early tomorrow. Ethan gave me a distracted hug. Already leaving, Mom? Okay, have a good night. Thanks for coming. Tasha gave me an equally automatic farewell kiss. Thanks for coming, Mother Parsal. See you soon. But in her eyes, I saw something that confirmed what I had feared all night. Relief. She was relieved I was leaving, that her perfect party could continue without the awkward presence of the humble mother-in-law who didn't fit into their new prosperous life as a couple. The cab ride home was silent. During the 40-minute drive, I mentally reviewed every detail of the night. The conversations where I was ignored, the moments where I was left talking alone, the embarrassing introductions where Simone minimized my importance, the indifference toward my gift, Ethan's lack of interest in including me in his important conversations. For the first time in my life, I began to wonder if I had been living in a bubble of self-deception, believing I was an important part of my son's life, when in reality, I was merely a family obligation to be fulfilled occasionally. That night in my small Southside apartment, I sat in the rocking chair where I used to embroider and began to remember all the sacrifices I had made so Ethan could get to where he was. The years of working double shifts to pay for his private school, the times I sold my own things to buy him clothes when he started dating Tasha, the Sundays I spent cooking for them when they were dating, preparing elaborate dishes that Tasha photographed for her social media but never learned to cook herself. I also recalled the times Tasha had made seemingly innocent comments that now took on a different meaning. Mother Pyral, why don't you buy more modern clothes? Ethan has the money to help you. Or doesn't it bother you that people know you're still working at your age? Back then, I thought they were just remarks. Now I understood they were signs of embarrassment. That morning, as I took off the navy blue dress I had chosen with such care, I saw myself in the closet mirror. And for the first time in years, I truly saw myself as others saw me. The 67-year-old woman with gray hair, deep wrinkles on her face, rough hands from so much sewing. A woman who represented the humble past her son preferred to keep discreet in his new prosperous life. It was there, standing in front of that mirror at 3 in the morning, when something fundamental broke inside my heart. Not in a dramatic way, but like a silent crack that suddenly allowed me to see the truth I had been avoiding. My son no longer needed me as a present and participatory mother. He needed me as a distant, manageable memory, a family obligation that didn't interfere with his real life. And that realization, that quiet heartbreak, was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise like always, but something felt different. The air in my house was still, heavy, like it was holding its breath with me. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and stared at the wall clock ticking away. Each sound reminded me how slowly time passes when your heart feels empty. I thought about Ethan's smile at the wedding, bright and proud. But that smile had not been for me. It had been for his new world, a world that didn't seem to have a place for me anymore. As I sipped my coffee, I realized I had to face a truth I had been hiding from for a long time. My son was no longer my little boy who needed my comfort or my help. He had built a life where my presence wasn't necessary, maybe not even welcome. I walked into my small living room and looked around. Every corner carried memories of him. His childhood photos still hung on the walls, the baseball glove he used as a boy still sat on the shelf, and his old college letters were neatly stacked in a drawer. I had kept them all these years like treasures, reminders that my sacrifices had meant something. But now I wasn't sure what they meant anymore. Later that afternoon, I sat by the window and looked at the street outside. The world was moving on like it always does. Kids were playing, people were walking to work, buses came and went. Life continued, and I realized painfully that I had spent too much of mine waiting for visits, waiting for calls, waiting for my son to remember that I still existed. That night, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would stop waiting. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. I only knew that I couldn't keep living like a shadow in my own life. A few days later, Ethan called. His voice was warm but hurried. "Hey, Mom. How are you? Sorry I haven't called. Things have been crazy with work." "I'm okay, son," I said softly. "How's everything with you and Tasha?" He hesitated for a moment. "We're good. Busy, you know how it is. Tasha's got some events with her parents this week. I wanted to ask if those events included me, but I already knew the answer. So instead, I said, that's nice. You both deserve some rest after the wedding." He paused again before adding, "Hey, Mom, actually, I wanted to ask you something. Could you embroider the initials on a few new shirts I bought? I'd pay you, of course." There it was, the reason for the call. Not to check on me, not to invite me, but to ask for a favor. "Of course, son," I replied. My voice was calm, even though inside I felt that small twist of pain again. "Just bring them by when you can." When I hung up, I looked at my sewing machine sitting quietly on the table. That machine had been my partner through all the years of struggle and sacrifice. Every piece I made had been part of keeping our lives together. School uniforms, curtains, his graduation suit, his wedding gift. Now it was just work again. As I embroidered Ethan's initials that week, I thought about all the times I had said yes, all the times I had changed my own plans, ignored my own needs, and made myself small to fit into their world. But as the needle moved through the cloth, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was time to stop trying so hard to belong. The following Sunday, I went to church alone. I had gone to St. Thomas Parish for years, but recently I had been skipping services whenever Ethan or Tasha invited me to lunch. Sitting in the pew that morning, I realized how much peace I had missed. The hymns, the light through the stained glass, the quiet moments of prayer, it all felt like coming home to myself. After Mass, a woman named Beatrice, who had lost her husband recently, sat next to me. "You look deep in thought, Grace," she said kindly. "I was," I admitted. "Sometimes life just surprises you in ways you didn't expect." She smiled gently. "Oh, honey, life always does that. The trick is to stop waiting for it to go back to what it used to be." That line stayed with me all day. Stop waiting for it to go back. That afternoon, I decided to try a small experiment. I didn't call Ethan. I didn't text him. I didn't send a good morning message like I always did. I wanted to see how long it would take for him to notice. A week went by, 8 days to be exact. When he finally called, it was again for a favor. "Hey, Mom. Sorry, I've been meaning to call. Could you hem some pants for Tasha? They're a bit long." My heart sank a little, but I smiled anyway, even though he couldn't see it. "Sure, son. Bring them over when you can." When he dropped them off, he didn't stay. He stood by the door, looked at his phone twice, and said, "We're late for a dinner thing with Tasha's parents. Love you, Mom." 3 words that used to mean the world to me. Now they sounded like a polite phrase he said on autopilot. That night, as I sat by my sewing table finishing Tasha's pants, I asked myself a hard question. When did my love become invisible? Over the next few days, I started noticing all the things I had done out of habit. I kept my house spotless in case they visited, even though they rarely did. I cooked extra food every weekend just in case Ethan showed up hungry. I saved money for birthday gifts, for holidays, for emergencies they might have. But they never asked for those things anymore. And still, I kept doing them, not because they needed it, but because I didn't know who I was without them. That realization was like a quiet ache that sat in my chest all day long. One evening, my friend Ilea came by. She was my neighbor and had known me since Curtis was alive. She looked at me over her coffee and said, "Grace, you've been quiet lately. What's going on?" I told her everything: the wedding, the words I overheard, the way Ethan had asked me to stay away from some of his events, and how invisible I felt. She sighed deeply. "Oh, Grace, I've seen this happen before. Kids grow up, they marry people from another world, and suddenly their old life embarrasses them." Her words hit like truth. "But Ethan's not like that," I said quietly, still trying to defend him. "Maybe not on purpose," she said softly. "But think about it. When was the last time they invited you to their place? Or included you in something important?" I couldn't answer. Dalia placed her hand on mine. "You've done your part, honey. You raised him. You gave him everything. Now it's time for you to live your life." After she left, I sat in my rocking chair and thought about her words. Live your life. It sounded simple, but it scared me because I didn't know what that meant anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got up and walked through the house in the dark, touching the walls, the framed photos, the things that had filled my life for decades. For the first time, I wondered who I would be if I stopped being Ethan's mom. The next morning, I took a deep breath and began with something small. I rearranged the furniture in my living room. I took down the old lace curtains I had kept for years and replaced them with something lighter. I moved my sewing machine to a brighter corner by the window. It wasn't much, but it felt like the start of something new. Later that week, Ethan called again. This time, his voice sounded serious. "Mom, Tasha and I want us to talk to you about something." My stomach tightened. "Of course, son. What is it?" He sighed. "Mom, we've been thinking about starting a family soon, and we want to make sure we're doing everything right, financially, socially, all of that. You know." "Yes," I said slowly. "That's wonderful news." "Yeah," he continued, "but Tasha thinks it might be better if, for a while, you don't come to certain events. Not because we don't love you, but, well, you come from a different world, Mom. And sometimes things you say make people uncomfortable." His words were careful, rehearsed. I could almost hear Tasha's voice behind them. "Uncomfortable how?" I asked softly. "You know, about money, or when you talk about how hard things were. People just don't understand that kind of talk. We don't want anyone to get the wrong idea about us." There it was, the truth I had been fearing. The story of my sacrifices, the story that had built his life, had become his source of shame. "I understand," I said quietly. He sounded relieved. "Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd get it." After he left that evening, I sat in my sewing room, staring at the half-finished cloth on my table. The fabric blurred through my tears, but they weren't angry tears. They were tears of release. I had finally stopped pretending I didn't understand what was happening. Ethan wasn't cruel. He was just gone, emotionally, socially, completely gone into another life where I didn't belong. That night, I made another silent promise. Not to him, not to Tasha, to myself. I would stop chasing people who didn't see me. The next week, I did something small but powerful. I stopped cleaning the guest room. I stopped keeping the fridge full of food they never came to eat. I stopped leaving the porch light on just in case they visited at night. For the first time in years, my house began to look like it belonged to one person, me. On Friday night, as I sat on the porch listening to the crickets, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Tasha. "Mother Pearl, my mom wants to invite you for lunch on Saturday. Just a small family gathering." 3 weeks earlier, I would have said yes instantly. But this time, I paused. "Thank you, Tasha," I typed. "But I already have plans." It was the first time I had said no. When I hit send, My hand trembled a little, but it felt right. The next morning, I actually did make plans. I signed up for a beginner's computer class at the community center. I didn't tell anyone. It was something I wanted for myself. That evening, I called my sister Maya in Charleston. She had been inviting me to visit for years. "Maya," I said, "I'm coming to see you soon." Her laugh came through the phone like sunlight. "Grace, you mean it?" "I do." And for the first time in a long time, I felt something warm spreading through my chest. Hope. That night, as I lay in bed, I whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, not for what I had lost, but for what I was starting to find. The next morning, I looked around my little house and saw it with new eyes. It wasn't empty. It was free. But I also knew this was just the beginning of a longer road, one where I would have to learn who Grace was when she wasn't Ethan's mother. And deep down, I could feel it. That road was about to take me somewhere I had never been before. The next few days passed quietly. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for Ethan to call. I wasn't checking my phone every few hours. I wasn't planning my meals around a visit that might never come. I was just living, and it felt strange, but in a good way. On Monday morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and opened my notebook. I wrote 3 simple goals at the top of the page. 1. Learn computers. 2. Visit Maya in Charleston. 3. Find something new that makes me happy. It was the first list I had made in decades that wasn't about someone else. At 10 that morning, I walked into the community center for my first computer class. The room was small and smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Around me sat women my age, nervous, smiling shyly, waiting to begin. The instructor, a cheerful woman in her 40s, said, "Welcome, ladies. Today, we're going to learn how to send an email." It sounded simple, but to me, it felt like magic. I had spent years sewing by hand, threading needles in silence. Now I was learning how to connect with the world again, one click at a time. When I pressed send on my first email to Maya, I smiled. It felt like the start of a new chapter. That evening, I went home with a small sense of pride that warmed me more than any praise I'd gotten in years. 2 days later, I called the art center and asked about embroidery classes. The lady on the phone told me they had a new course starting the following week. Without hesitation, I signed up. When I hung up, I realized how automatic it had been, making a decision just for me. No guilt, no second guessing, just joy. That Saturday, as I walked to the market for new threads and fabrics, I passed by a cafe I hadn't entered in years. The sign read, "Open Mic Poetry Night." I smiled. I used to love poetry when I was young, before life became all bills and responsibilities. Maybe, I thought, one day I'd come listen, maybe even share something. The thought made my heart flutter. When I got home, I organized my new fabrics by color and texture. Reds, golds, blues. The light from the window hit them beautifully, and for a second, I just sat there staring at them, realizing how long it had been since I admired something purely because it was beautiful. That evening, while I was threading my needle, my phone rang. Ethan. "Hey, Mom," he said. "We haven't heard from you in a bit. Everything okay?" "I'm fine, son," I said warmly. "Just been busy with my classes." "Classes?" he repeated, surprised. "What classes?" "I'm learning computers." And I joined an embroidery group. There was a pause on the line. "Oh, that's great, Mom," he said finally, sounding confused, maybe even a little unsettled. "I'm happy to hear that," he added quickly. "Anyway, Tasha and I wanted to ask if you could watch Simone's kids on Saturday. She and her husband are going out." I smiled gently. The old me would have said yes immediately. "I'm sorry, son," I said calmly. "I can't. I already have plans." A small silence followed. "Plans?" "Yes. My class and then dinner with my friends." I could almost hear him blink in surprise through the phone. "Oh, okay. I guess we'll figure something out." "You always do," I said softly. When I hung up, I exhaled slowly. My hands were trembling a little, not from fear, but from pride. That was the first time I had said no to my son without guilt. The next day, I went to my embroidery class. There I met women who quickly became like friends. There was Olivia, who had started painting after losing her husband, and Gloria, who had learned to drive at 69, and Alicia, who had gone back to school at 71. They were all proof that life doesn't end when you grow old, it just changes shape. Over tea, Olivia said something that stayed with me. The secret, Grace, is to stop asking permission to live. Her words felt like a window opening inside my heart. That night, I looked at my reflection in the mirror again. The same gray hair, the same wrinkles, but a different light in my eyes. A quiet strength. The following week, Ethan called again. "Mom, are you upset with us? You've been acting different lately." "No, son," I said gently. "I'm not upset. I'm just living a little differently now." "What do you mean?" "I'm doing things I enjoy. Taking classes, meeting people, making plans." He hesitated, clearly unsure how to respond. "That's good, Mom. You deserve that." "I do," I said softly. After the call, I smiled. He didn't understand yet, but one day he would. Days turned into weeks, and slowly my life filled with new colors. My mornings started with coffee and music instead of silence. My afternoons were full of stitching, laughter, and stories shared among women who knew how it felt to start over at 60. At night, I no longer felt lonely. I felt free. But freedom has a strange way of confusing the people who are used to your old self. One Saturday afternoon, Tasha called. Her tone was sweet, but there was tension underneath. "Mother Pearsall, are you free next Sunday? My mom is hosting a little luncheon. She'd love for you to come." I thought for a moment. "Thank you, Tasha, but I'm not sure. I'll check my calendar." "My mom already set a seat for you," she pressed, still smiling. "I appreciate it," I said, "but I may have a class that day." There was silence on the line. Then she said quietly, "You've changed, Mother Pearsall." "Yes," I said simply. "I have." After the call, I didn't feel guilty. Instead, I felt something new, power. That evening, I wrote in my notebook again, "When you stop living for others, they think you've changed. But really, you've just started living." The following week, I finally made the trip to Charleston. Maya met me at the station with tears in her eyes and arms open wide. "Grace, you look different," she said. "You look alive." I laughed. Maybe because I finally am. At her house, surrounded by ocean air and her laughter, I felt years of tension melt away. We stayed up late talking about our childhood, our parents, and all the things we had given up without realizing it. "You know," Maya said one night over tea, "we spend our whole lives being needed. And then, when we're not needed anymore, we forget how to just be." Her words hit deep. "Yes," I said quietly, "that's what I've been learning. To just be Grace." For the next 2 weeks, I stayed in Charleston. We walked along the pier, visited old churches, and even took a painting class together. Each morning, I'd wake up to the smell of the sea and realize I didn't miss Atlanta. I didn't miss waiting for calls that never came. One morning, I got a text from Ethan. "Mom, when are you coming home? Tasha's planning a family dinner." I replied simply, "I'm not sure yet. I'll come when I'm ready." He replied with a single word, "Okay." That was progress. During my last night in Charleston, Maya asked, "Do you ever feel angry, Grace? About everything?" I thought for a moment. I used to, but not anymore. I just feel grateful, because losing what I had made room for what I needed. When I returned to Atlanta, my house didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt peaceful. Mine. I spent my mornings on the porch, my afternoons at the art center, and my evenings talking to new friends. One Thursday, while teaching a beginner how to embroider her first flower, the instructor, Carmen, came over and said, "Grace, you're wonderful with the others. Would you like to help teach next month's class?" My eyes widened. "Me?" "Yes, you," she said, smiling. "You have patience, and people listen to you." For a second, I couldn't speak. It had been so long since someone saw me as valuable for who I was, not just what I could do for them. "I'd love to," I said finally. That night, I sat in my rocking chair and thought about the journey, from tears at a wedding to teaching others how to create beauty. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Ethan. "Mom, I heard from Aunt Simone that you're teaching now." "That's amazing." I smiled. "It's just a small class, but yes, I'm enjoying it." "That's great," he said sincerely. "Tasha and I are proud of you." For the first time in years, his words felt real. A week later, they came to visit. When Tasha walked in, her eyes went wide at how different the house looked. "Oh, you changed everything," she said. "I did," I replied gently. "It feels good this way." They sat with me on the porch, and for the first time, our conversation wasn't about them. It was about me, my students, my trip to Charleston, the class I'd be teaching soon. Tasha listened quietly. "You sound so happy," she said finally. "I am," I said. "I didn't realize how much I'd missed myself." Before they left, Ethan hugged me tighter than usual. "Mom, I want you to know something. I see now how much you've done for us, and I'm sorry if I ever made you feel less." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I smiled. "You don't have to be sorry, son. We're both just learning how to love each other the right way." That night, I sat under the soft glow of my porch light and watched the stars. The same stars I used to watch years ago when I prayed for Ethan's success. Now, I was praying for my own peace. But life always has its tests. A few days later, I got a call from my friend Gloria. "Grace," she said quickly, "there's an exhibition at the Art Center next week, and they want to feature your work." "My work?" I asked, stunned. "Yes, your tapestry piece, the one inspired by traditional African stitching." Carmen showed it to the director, and he loved it. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Me, Grace from Southside Atlanta, being featured in an art show. That night, I called Ethan to tell him. "Mom, that's incredible," he said. "We'll be there. Tasha will love it." For the first time, they weren't including me out of duty. They were showing up for me out of pride. The night of the exhibition, I stood in front of my tapestry, my name, Grace Payot, printed neatly on the small white card below it. People stopped, admired, and asked me questions. For once, I wasn't someone's mother or someone's burden. I was an artist. When Ethan and Tasha arrived, their eyes were shining. "Mom," Ethan whispered, "I didn't know you could do this." "I didn't either," I said softly. After the event, as we stood outside under the city lights, Tasha turned to me and said something I'll never forget. "Mother Pearsall, I think I owe you an apology. I misjudged you. You're not just a part of Ethan's past. You're an incredible woman in your own right." Her voice trembled, and for the first time since the wedding, her words felt genuine. I took her hand and smiled. "Thank you, dear. That means more than you know." That night, I sat in bed and thought about how far life had taken me, from being unwanted at a wedding to being celebrated in a gallery, from silence to recognition, from invisibility to light. But deep down, I knew something else was coming, one last test that would show me if this new Grace was truly unbreakable. And I was ready for it. But life always finds new ways to test the strength we think we've found. It started on a gray Thursday morning. The rain was soft, tapping gently on my windows. I was working on an embroidery piece for my upcoming class when the phone rang. It was Ethan. His voice was quiet, slower than usual. "Mom," he said, "I need to tell you something." I set my needle down. "What's wrong, son?" "Tasha's mom, Brenda, had a mild heart attack last night. She's in the hospital." My heart sank. "Oh no. Is she stable?" "Yes," he said. "The doctor said she'll recover, but Tasha's been really shaken up. We might stay with her for a while." "That's understandable," I said gently. "Family comes first." He paused. "Mom, Tasha would appreciate it if you didn't come to the hospital right now. Her parents are already stressed, and she doesn't want too many visitors." I stayed silent for a moment. "I understand, Ethan," I said softly. After we hung up, I sat at my table for a long time, listening to the rain. It wasn't that I needed to be there. It was that I had once been the person Ethan called in every crisis, and now I was being asked to stay away. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "This is part of the test." That night, I prayed for Brenda's recovery. I didn't feel anger or jealousy, only a quiet ache, the kind that comes from knowing life has changed forever. A few days later, Ethan called again. Mom, good news. Brenda's doing much better. The doctors say she'll be home soon. That's wonderful, son, I said with relief. I'm glad she's recovering. She's very grateful for your prayers, he said. And, Mom, I wanted to thank you for understanding. Tasha told me she knows how much that meant. That's all right, Ethan. I know when to step back, I said, smiling to myself. But after the call, I thought about that phrase, step back. For years, I had been stepping back, giving space, making room. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to step forward again, not into Ethan's world, but into my own. 2 weeks later, Carmen, the art instructor, asked me to fill in for her Saturday class because she was traveling. I agreed nervously. The morning of the class, I stood in front of a group of 10 women waiting for me to begin. My hands trembled slightly, but the moment I started teaching, something beautiful happened. The nerves faded. My voice grew stronger. By the end of the lesson, the women clapped. You explain things so clearly, Grace, one of them said. You make it feel easy. That evening, Carmen called me. I heard great things about your class, Grace. How would you feel about teaching your own Saturday workshop next month? I covered my mouth, shocked. Me? You want me to teach full-time? Yes, she said warmly. You've earned it. I thanked her through tears. When I hung up, I sat in silence, overwhelmed with gratitude. All those years of working alone in my small sewing room had finally become something more. I was a teacher now. A week later, I got a call from Ethan. Mom, are you home? Yes, I am. We're coming over. We have something to tell you. When they arrived, Tasha's face looked softer, less guarded. Mother Pearsall, she said kindly, we wanted to tell you together. I'm pregnant. My heart leapt. Oh my goodness. Congratulations. Ethan hugged me tightly. You're going to be a grandmother. Tears filled my eyes. That's the best news I've heard in years. For the first time in a long time, we spent the whole evening together, laughing, talking, remembering old times. I made tea, and Tasha even asked for my favorite cookie recipe. It was small, but it meant everything. Over the next few weeks, we talked often. I helped them find comfortable fabrics for the baby's room curtains, and Ethan asked me to make a hand-embroidered blanket. When I started working on it, I found myself smiling again, not out of duty but joy. But happiness has its own tests. One morning, while teaching my class, I suddenly felt dizzy. The room seemed to sway. I steadied myself on the table until it passed. Just low sugar, I told my students with a smile. But later that night, it happened again. My vision blurred, and I had to sit down quickly. The next day, I went to the doctor. He ran a few tests and said, Grace, your blood pressure is high and you're pushing yourself too hard. You need rest. Rest. The word felt strange. I had spent a lifetime working, first for my family, now for myself. The idea of stopping felt like failure. But as I sat in my car outside the clinic, I realized something. Maybe rest wasn't giving up. Maybe it was another kind of strength, the strength to care for myself the way I had cared for everyone else. That night, I called Ethan to tell him, Son, the doctor says I need to take it easy for a while. He sounded concerned. Mom, are you okay? Do you need anything? I'll be fine, I said softly. I just need to slow down. Promise me you'll call if you need help, he said. I promise. A few days later, Ethan and Tasha showed up with groceries and a bouquet of sunflowers. You've done so much for us, Mom, Ethan said. It's our turn to take care of you for a bit. It was the first time in years that I had felt genuinely looked after, not out of guilt, but love. Tasha sat with me in the living room, folding tiny baby clothes she had brought to show me. You know, she said quietly, I used to think you were too proud, too independent. But now I understand. You just want to feel respected. I looked at her and smiled. That's all any of us want, dear. To be seen. The following weeks passed peacefully. Ethan checked on me daily, and Tasha sent me pictures of her growing belly. I rested, embroidered, and even wrote a small journal about my journey. One evening, while sitting on the porch, I got a call from Carmen. "Grace, I hope you're doing better. We're planning a Mother's Day exhibition next month. I'd like you to showcase your work as our featured artist." I gasped. "Me? Why?" "Because your story inspires everyone," she said. "You represent what it means to start again." That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about those words, start again. That was exactly what I had done. But life wasn't done teaching me yet. 3 weeks later, Tasha went into early labor. Ethan called me in a panic. "Mom, we're at the hospital. It's too soon. She's only 8 months." "I'm on my way," I said, grabbing my bag. When I arrived, Ethan was pacing in the hallway. He looked so much like the little boy I used to calm after nightmares. "They said it's complicated," he whispered, his hands trembling. I took his hands in mine. "She's strong, son. She'll be fine. So will the baby." We sat together in silence, listening to the sounds of nurses and machines. Hours passed. Then finally a doctor came out smiling. "Congratulations. You have a healthy baby boy." Ethan broke down crying. "Mom, he's perfect," he said through tears. When I held the baby for the first time, my heart overflowed. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and all the years of loneliness and silence disappeared in that single moment. Ethan looked at me and said softly, "We're naming him Curtis." After Dad. Tears streamed down my face. That's beautiful. In that moment, everything came full circle. All the pain, the distance, the heartbreak, it had all led to this small, breathing miracle in my arms. Over the next few weeks, I spent time helping them adjust. I didn't take over, and I didn't hide in the background. I was simply there, steady, calm, and strong. Tasha often asked for my advice, and Ethan came to me for reassurance. Our relationship had changed. It was no longer built on guilt or obligation. It was built on respect. One afternoon, as I rocked baby Curtis to sleep, Tasha stood by the door watching me. Her eyes softened. "You know," she said quietly, "you're the kind of mother I want to be." That sentence touched me more than anything else. Weeks turned into months. My health improved, the baby grew, and my art class expanded. I began teaching 2 days a week and mentoring younger artists. My life felt full again, not because of others, but because I had built it myself. But there was still one thing left, something I hadn't done in years. One warm evening, I walked to the park with my notebook. I sat under a tree, feeling the breeze on my face, and began to write a letter to my younger self. "Dear Grace," I wrote, "you thought your worth depended on how much you could give. But love doesn't mean disappearing. It means growing, learning, and letting go without losing yourself." I stopped writing and smiled, watching the sunset. The sky glowed orange and gold, colors of peace. When I got home, the phone rang. It was Carmen again. "Grace, I have news. The local newspaper wants to feature your story for Mother's Day." "Mine?" I asked, surprised. "Yes, they want to write about how you turned your pain into art and independence." I felt tears rise again, but this time they were tears of joy. That weekend, Ethan and Tasha brought baby Curtis to visit. We sat together on the porch, drinking sweet tea while the baby slept in my arms. "Mom," Ethan said softly, "you've changed everything, not just for yourself, but for us too. You taught us how to love better." I smiled, holding the baby close. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you were to find who you really are. The evening sun bathed the porch in gold. It felt like peace had finally come home. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of my journey, just another beginning. Because even at 67, life was still teaching me how to live. And one letter in the mail arriving the next morning would remind me just how far I had come and how much further my story was about to go. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, with no return address. The handwriting was neat, unfamiliar, but gentle, the kind of handwriting that belongs to someone who takes their time. For a moment, I hesitated before opening it. It had been years since I'd received an actual letter. These days, everything was messages, calls, or emails. I took a deep breath, sat by my window with my morning coffee, and opened it carefully. Inside was a single folded page and an old photograph. The photograph stopped my breath. It was me, standing in front of the small sewing shop I used to work at in the 1980s. Next to me stood a tall man in a denim jacket, smiling warmly. I hadn't seen that picture in 40 years. And below it, in faded ink, were the words, "Some debts of the heart never fade." I unfolded the letter with trembling hands. "Dear Grace, I don't know if you remember me, but my name is Samuel. I was the foreman at the factory where your husband Curtis worked. The day of the accident, I was there. I've lived with that day in my heart for decades. Curtis saved my life. He pushed me out of the way when the beam fell. I was supposed to die that day, not him. For years, I didn't know how to reach you. I tried, but you had moved. Recently, while visiting Atlanta, I came across a newspaper article about a woman named Grace Pyle, an artist who turned her pain into beauty. The story mentioned your husband's name. I knew it was you. Grace, I've wanted to thank you all my life. I also wanted to tell you that Curtis's sacrifice didn't go in vain. It changed me. I went back to school, opened my own business, and made a promise that part of everything I earned would go to helping the families of injured workers. And I've kept that promise. I hope you don't mind, but I've also set up a small scholarship fund in your husband's name, the Curtis Pyle Memorial Grant, to support young apprentices in trade schools. It's my way of saying thank you. If you're ever open to it, I'd love to meet and share some memories. I owe him my life, and I owe you my peace. With gratitude, Samuel Hayes. I sat there, unable to move. The room around me blurred as tears filled my eyes. All these years, I had lived thinking Curtis's death was just a cruel accident, a wound with no meaning. But now, I realized his sacrifice had saved someone who went on to change other lives. That morning, I felt like the past had finally found peace. Later that day, I called Ethan. "Son," I said softly, "something amazing happened." When I told him about the letter, he was silent for a long time. Then he said quietly, "Mom, that's incredible. Dad would have been so proud of you." I smiled. Maybe he already is. That evening, I pulled out my old photo albums. I looked at Curtis's face, kind, steady, full of love. For years, I had avoided looking too long because it hurt too much. But now I felt only warmth. I whispered, "You're still with me, Curtis, in every stitch, in every breath." The next week, I met Samuel at a cafe downtown. He was older now, gray-haired, with kind eyes that carried the weight of years. When he saw me, he stood and hugged me like an old friend. "Grace," he said, his voice thick, "I've thought of you and Curtis for decades." We sat for hours, sharing stories about the factory, about that day, about how life had unfolded for both of us. When he told me about the scholarship, I felt my eyes fill again. "You've turned pain into purpose, Samuel," I said softly. He shook his head. "No, Grace, you did. You kept going. You raised your son. You built a new life. I just followed the light your husband left behind." When we parted, he handed me an envelope. "This is a small token, the first official notice about the scholarship. It's already been funded." I opened it that night. Inside was a certificate with Curtis's name in bold letters, the Curtis Pyle Memorial Grant, established in honor of a man whose hands built more than he ever knew. I traced the letters with my fingers and smiled through tears. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was sad, but because I was filled with gratitude. After so many years of feeling invisible, forgotten, unwanted, life had circled back to remind me that every quiet act of love leaves a mark that never fades. The next day, I went to the art center early. I pinned the letter and the photo on our inspiration board. When my students arrived, they stopped to read it. One of them said softly, "Miss Grace, that's beautiful. You've lived such a life." I smiled. "Yes, and the best part is it's not over yet." Over the next few weeks, things only got better. The newspaper article about me came out on Mother's Day. It told the story of a woman who had spent her life sewing for others and finally stitched her own future. People stopped me in the market to congratulate me. Some even brought me old linens to embroider, saying they wanted a piece of Grace's heart in their homes, but nothing compared to what came next. One Sunday afternoon, Ethan and Tasha came by with baby Curtis. They had something behind their backs. "Close your eyes, Mom," Ethan said. When I opened them, there was a framed photo on the table, my art piece from the exhibition, beside a plaque that read, "To our mother, Grace, for teaching us that strength isn't loud, it's patient." Tasha wiped a tear from her eye. "We wanted to surprise you. You changed how we see family, how we see love." I hugged them both, holding little Curtis between us. "You've made me proud too," I whispered. In that moment, the years of pain, the quiet heartbreaks, the loneliness, they all dissolved into something gentle and complete. Life wasn't perfect. It never had been. But it was whole again. Months passed peacefully. My classes grew. My art began to sell online. I even taught a small group of younger women from my neighborhood how to turn sewing into a small business. Watching them succeed filled me with pride. One afternoon, I received an invitation in the mail, another envelope that made my heart race. It was from the mayor's office. They were hosting a local ceremony to honor contributors to the arts and community service, and my name was on the list. When the day arrived, I wore a soft lavender dress and my mother's old pearl earrings, the same ones I had worn at Ethan's wedding years ago. But this time, I wore them for me. When my name was called, I walked up to the stage as people clapped. The mayor smiled and said, "Grace Pyle reminds us that creativity doesn't fade with age." She turned her own story into a light that guides others. The crowd stood and applauded. I looked out and saw Ethan, Tasha, baby Curtis, and even Samuel, all smiling proudly. For a moment, I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, "Curtis, we made it." That night, back home, I sat on my porch under the stars again. The air was cool, the sky endless. I thought about the journey, from heartbreak to healing, from invisibility to purpose. I remembered the woman who once cried alone after being ignored at her son's wedding. I wanted to reach back through time and tell her, "Hold on. Your story isn't ending, it's just changing chapters." Because sometimes life waits until we're broken to show us what we're truly made of. As I rocked gently in my chair, the baby's laughter drifted from inside the house. Ethan and Tasha were visiting for the weekend, and hearing that sound, the sound of life continuing, filled me with peace. I whispered softly, "This is what love looks like. Not perfection, just presence." And I realized then that love isn't something we lose, it's something we grow into. The world outside was quiet, but inside, my heart was alive. I picked up my notebook and wrote the last line of my journal. For years, I stitched clothes for others. Now I stitch memories for myself, threads of forgiveness, faith, and freedom. I closed the notebook and smiled. A cool breeze brushed my face. It felt like Curtis saying, "You did good, Grace." And for the first time in a long, long time, I believed it. Sometimes the people we lose become the reason we find ourselves again. Grace's story reminds us that no matter our age, life still holds new beginnings, forgiveness, and hope. If her journey touched your heart, please take a second to like this video, subscribe for more real-life stories, and tell us in the comments, what does family mean to you today?